Hey guys, Lorraine back with you with another card video. So I had some of the painted cut out images from a few cards ago using the Simon Says Stamp Happy Fall Y'all stamp set. And I just want to go ahead and use them up. So I am going to make another card. It's probably going to be pretty similar to the card that I had made a couple of days ago. That one was a slimline. This one is going to be A2 size. So I started with another piece of the heavyweight white cardstock that I cut out into a rolling hill using my Distress Oxides. Going to start with some Twisted Citron, going to ink that up with the makeup brush and frame that with some of the peeled paint. Again, I do use the makeup brush for that airier, more lighter application. If you wanted something heavier and more solid, you would want to use the Tim Holtz foam applicator. So we'll go ahead and flip that around and I'm going to start working on the clouds. And today I'm using the My Favorite Things Cloud Stencil. I'm going to go ahead and ink up with some of the Speckled Egg Distress Oxide. And when you're using this stencil, you want to make sure that you actually start applying the ink on the stencil and gradually just drag it just until you come off of the edge of the stencil. You're not inking the cloud, you're inking the lined image around the cloud, which kind of gives it that cloud illusion. If you start inking directly on the paper, you're not going to get that white fluffy cloud. You're just going to get a big blue blob. That's not what you're looking for. So I just rotate this stencil around. That way they all are, different and not a totally uniform set of clouds, because that's not really what you see in the sky when you look up. And I will bring that down as close as I can to my hill and just, get it in there as best as I can. Had a little bit of a smudge, and I was just able to use my finger to get that taken care of. I do like this cloud stencil better than the one that I had used in my previous video, I have to admit. I was kind of on the fence about it, and it turned out okay, but I prefer this one. I'm going to go ahead and blast that with my heat tool. When you have this much ink, even though it's a lighter application than what you would get with the foam tool, it's still a good deal of ink. And it keeps the paper wet and it warps it a little bit. And if you are going to stamp directly on that background, which I plan on doing, you want to make sure it's completely dry. If it is not, you will get a muddled stamped image. And that is certainly not what I'm going for. So I pulled out my Tonic Studios Tim Holtz stamp platform. I do believe I actually still have these stamps in my MISTI. So I'm going to switch over to this one. And I'm just starting to fiddle and see where I may want my die cuts to be. I think that's actually the image that I go with, that setup right there, leaving some room on the right side for my sentiment. This is the first time that I'm using this sentiment, and I, as always, forgot to rub my fingers over it. When you're using a new stamp, you usually have somewhat of a waxy residue on the stamp, and that's just from the actual manufacturing process. The best way to get that off is to just rub your fingers over it, or stamp it with some ink on some scratch paper or even some Versamark ink, and that just conditions it so it will accept the ink a little bit better. But I never seem to remember that until I'm looking back saying, oh yeah, I should have done that. So write it down, folks, write it down. Condition your stamps first. If not, it's not a big deal. You just wind up stamping it several times, which is the beauty of these stamp tools like the MISTI and the platform, where you're able just to open the lid, which is hinged, and you can restamp in the same position multiple times. I mean, that is the epitome of the function of these stamp tools. And there you go. Did not get a crisp image. So I'm just going to restamp, pressing down until I get that. Also, the thicker the stamp, the more you're going to want to stamp it to get a crisp image. If it's a very thin font, a very thin line, it does not take much, but these are pretty solid letters. I am going to go ahead and coat that with my Ranger Super Fine Detail Clear Embossing Powder, brushing off just a little bit there with my brush. And I will go ahead and blast that with my heat tool. You know that the embossing powder is melted when it goes from that dusty matte look into the super shiny glossy effect that you see there. And I truly love watching embossing powder melt. If you make cards and you don't, you're really not a card maker. I'm just kidding, guys, just kidding. So again, I'm still just fiddling with my layout. It took me a while. Sometimes I have a good idea and I know exactly what I'm going to do as far as my layout, but today I was struggling with it a little bit. I didn't want it to be too similar to what I had done before, but it sort of kind of turned out to be pretty similar to what I did before, but that's okay. I think what actually sold the layout for me was that little sub sentiment that I'm going to wind up stamping there that says full tummies. So it's going to say happy hearts, full tummies. So, you know, in my head, the pumpkin pie, the coffee kind of went with the happy hearts and full tummies. So I think that's what sold me. Then I went ahead and decided to use the thought bubble for him. With the whole coffee soon stamp I'm going to put in there. I figured I would send this to a friend that I miss and that I would really enjoy going to have coffee with again soon after the whole pandemic is over. Like everybody else, just staying inside my house and struggling through it, missing my friends. Hopefully soon we'll all be back to normal. Going to go ahead and glue down my images there, and I do use the Nuvo glue. That is my glue of preference. I was considering putting some of the foam tape on the bear, but I just didn't want to fiddle with it that much at that point. I did wind up using some foam tape on the back of the pumpkin pie and the green coffee cup, and then ultimately I did put some foam tape on the back of the panel before I adhered it to the card base. And even with those tiny little pieces, I just find myself struggling to get that release paper off of that Big Mama foam tape. I am anxiously awaiting finishing up the first roll that I have so I can try one of the newer ones in hopes that it will be a little bit easier. If it's not, I think I'm going to switch back to the Scotch foam tape. And I will go ahead and use my VersaFine black ink again, and I'm going to stamp in that thought bubble. And then I will stamp the coffee soon in there, like he's, you know, waving to his friend that he misses because he's stuck in the forest all there by himself, you know, not wanting to get the coronavirus and missing his friend, hoping that he can hook up with him soon and have some coffee. That's my story. I'm sticking with it. It's how I see it in my head, guys. I think I'm going a little pandemic crazy like everybody else. So that's the layout I decided to go with. I do have that tree hanging off the edge there, which I decided that I do not want, so I will flip that over and just cut off that edge. I don't want that hanging over when I apply it to the card base. Had a little bit of a smudge there that I'm just going to use my mono sand eraser to buff off. And there's that Big Mama foam tape that I worked my way through. Just going to go ahead and adhere that to the card base so it's popped up a little bit. And there it is. That's what I decided to go with. And there's the card that I made in the previous video. So pretty similar, but not quite the same. I'm not sure which one I like best. Which one do you like best? Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell so when you get notified. And have a great day. See you again soon.